can the continent of Africa reform its energy policy's potential to enhance the much neglected energy sector?
As you know, for renewable energy resources, Africa is endowed with a lot of hydropower, a lot of sun. You can see the sun belt covering mostly the whole continent. The wind energy resources, all the coasts of Africa, you can find very high speeds of wind energy. Also the geothermal energy. It is one of the most promising source of energy in the continent, especially in the Rift Valley system. And so the resources are there and the need is there. So I think it is our role as African to work on that.
As Madam, Her Excellency the Commissioner said, renewable energies are very abundant here in Africa, thanks to God. But this potential is not yet tackled the right way. Generally speaking, of course, we have some successes, but we do have also some scales behind the average of other continents. As you said, Africa has already even less than 30% of electricity access as an average, which is very low when comparing to Latin America, for example, or Asia, which continents are already above 80% of access, which is really a challenge for Africa. But the renewable energies needs, of course, as Madame says before, first of all, a common effort together with all the countries of the continent. We should speak about it. We should also learn from each other. And there are some preconditions, like a legal framework, a plan of action, of course, training facilities to prepare all the necessary human resources to take care of the project. And of course, financing is also a must and should be organized within countries or within region, or why not within continent through the African Union and all the African bodies taking care of this.
In Nigeria, presently, there are many existing dams that were originally built for irrigation and maybe for potable water supply, but without the hydropower component. The Ministry of Power is looking at this, and in natural fact, we have carried out bankable feasibility studies on 10 of these existing dams that we call the low-hanging fruits, because it's either they have the pit for the hydropower component enclosed in them, but they don't have the powerhouse there. These ones are going to be put off for concessioning, and we have even appointed transactional advisors for them, and we hope private sectors will bid into these dams to complete them. And they have a lot of potentials. There's one that has 9 megawatts, there's one that has 6 megawatts, there's between 1 megawatt and 10 megawatts. Pulling all these resources, we can supply a large area. Then there are other 17 existing dams that are being studied presently, which also pulling them together can give about 104 megawatts.
Let me move to Jean. Africa is said to have vast potentials when you talk about geothermal, just like Her Excellency the Commissioner said. We can generate 9,000 megawatts. And of this potential, only 57 megawatts are being tapped. And that's in Kenya and also here in Ethiopia. They are tapping about around 2 megawatts. I think that should have improved. There is also a lot of potential from wind, solar, and also the solar system. But what are the challenges stopping Africa from tapping fully into all these potential solar, geothermal, and hydropower?
Well, I think many of the challenges are currently being discussed in this conference here, and they have to do with indeed access to finance, the proper role of the private sector, creating the partnerships between government and the private sector to indeed tap in these potentials. But in my view, perhaps the biggest or one of the other big challenges will be how to make sure that all the other people out there are also benefiting from all these renewable energy options. I think many of the examples you now just mentioned indeed will provide increased access for consumers, for customers in the urban areas, in small towns, etc., those who are connected to the grid. And I think we might easily forget in all these big projects, which indeed are necessary and should come on stream, because indeed Africa has the opportunity to jump straight away into a vast amount of renewable energy sources. I think we should also look at what are the smaller renewable energy sources available to the many people who live out there in the villages, who are away from the grid, and what opportunities they have to make use of renewable energy sources. So on one side, yes, there is the big opportunities which should be tapped, but we also should look at all the smaller opportunities, which are there with biomass, biofuels, with charcoal, improved charcoal use. And there are many more biomass opportunities like biogas. All these opportunities need to be looked at as well.
Nigeria is doing a lot in terms of hydropower, but it's like it seems the efforts are we're having barriers. What is your ministry having as challenges or barriers to achieve the full potential you thought Nigeria should have in terms of hydropower?
As we are aware, the power sector in Nigeria is being reformed presently from the otherwise government-controlled monopolistic market to a more diversified private sector-driven and market-driven power sector. And as we are moving away from this government ownership into the private sector ownership, it became incumbent that we should be looking at other areas that can give power to our people. In that instance, the existing hydro power plants are going to be concessioned. Government is going to divest itself of some shares in this hydro because waters belong to the nation, and that one cannot be given and considered to a particular person. So in that instance, we are looking at in Nigeria presently, the barriers that we have presently are being overcome with this diversification because investors are being encouraged to come inside and put money. You know, power sector is capital intensive and no government alone can provide all the money. And that's why this type of conference that we are having is very important.
Well, the experience in Asia was, Asia went through an enormous growth spurt in the last decades. And I think there was a wider realization that economic growth per se is not enough. Economic growth has to be pro-poor and economic growth has to be sustainable. And I think government institutions, and especially the banks, the Asian Development Bank, came to the realization that something broader needs to be done. So the Asian Development Bank took the initiative to pull in other players, the private sector notably, and that could be in terms of equity and other financing modalities, to become part of that agenda of pro-poor and sustainable growth. And that very much materialized also in the energy sector, where they stimulated interest of private players to come on board and invest in renewable energy options.
And that's exactly what the engineer DBC was talking about, private investors coming into Nigeria. About how far have you gone? Is it really looking good for Nigeria?
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. And that's why we need to make a shout of it. The General Electrics recently signed an MOU with Nigeria, because when we are talking of the private sector participation, it's not only restricted to constructing the dams or assembling, installing the panels. There are a lot of areas that can be looked at. The manufacturing, the service, the maintenance aspect of it.
Distribution?
The distribution. There is market for all this in Nigeria that the private sector can always come into. For example, we don't have any place where we can have transformers, maybe in South Africa or maybe in Egypt. But we need to have all these ones in Africa. The investors can come to Nigeria, because that's what exactly the G is trying to do in Nigeria now.
Okay. Dr. Ibrahim, I know that energy availability and accessibility doesn't come free, and it doesn't come cheap. It's really capital intensive. And my concern is like, I don't know, that we have projects that we want to attract investors. The African countries are looking forward to like having investments growing in the rural areas, the urban areas as well. But what is your office doing at the AU to make sure that you harmonize this for the African continent?
Yeah, you touched a very important issue, this harmonized policies, regulations, even the capacities of the member states and the regional economic communities. You know that as African Union, we are dealing mainly with the regional economic communities, as they are also in their turn deal with the member states. So one is the regulations, because the private sector cannot come and invest if he is not sure that his investment is in the right way, the risk is minimum, the production, I mean the electricity that he is going to produce will be purchased by someone. So this area of regulations is important. The building the capacity of the countries and the regional economic communities in how to prepare these power purchase agreements, how to have these independent power producers in the continents and in the region. All these areas, we need to do some work on that. And that's what we are doing, especially with the regional power pools. We are doing a lot on that, and even we have support from our partners in this area to build the capacity specifically. Another area is build the capacity and how to prepare projects, how to implement projects, how to follow up. Even the developer is someone from outside, but me as the owner of the project, I should be educated and well trained on how to follow up and audit and supervise.
So it's not just the investors you are advising, you're also advising the countries?
Yes, sure.
Okay, so
sure.
if I'm an investor and I have the money to invest in a place like Tunisia or Nigeria or Ethiopia, I should just come to your office and you help me out?
You are welcome.
Okay, let me go to Ambassador Ben. There is something really controversial around the world now. I'm talking about nuclear power. South Africa seems to be the only African country with commercial nuclear plants. But do you think Africa is ripe for nuclear power and its assets, like what we saw in Japan?
No, I think nuclear is really a very big issue. And we think also that most of the African countries, maybe except South Africa, cannot afford to have really a competitive electronuclear power plant. First of all, usually for Tunisia, for example, one single power plant, nuclear, could represent 20% of the GDP, which is very, very big. This is, first of all, on the financial and economic level. Secondly, if you have other solutions which are competitive, renewables are one of the best solutions for the whole continent, and all the region have abundant reserve for that. And one thing also could help all these countries. Renewable energy and energy efficiency together is the better choice for any country. Even with huge reserves of oil and gas, it is still a very good choice. Because, first of all, it's widespread. Everyone can benefit from it. You don't have, as our colleague said, you don't have to put it really on lines, etc. You can have any kind of solution. So it's very, very smooth, very flexible. And secondly, renewable energies create jobs. There are 5 million jobs in the world. Germany, for example, where I have been ambassador, created by renewable energy more than 350,000 jobs. So this is really a big opportunity for rural areas, for villages, for our young generation to prepare themselves and to enter this. This is, I think, the best choice for a lot of reasons. Because why energy is important? Because without energy, without good access to energy, you cannot develop your economy and your society.
Ambassador,
really
I like to quickly, sorry to cut you short. I want to ask Jean a very important question. Why is it that South Africa, in Sub-Saharan Africa, is doing so well that even at times when you do the statistics on the negatives in Africa concerning energy, they exclude South Africa? What is it that they are doing that other Sub-Saharan African countries are not doing, that even North Africa is also doing? Because they are putting South Africa and North Africa at par. But what is wrong with other Sub-Saharan African countries?
Well, I don't know what is wrong. I've been a few times in South Africa, and it would be a bit presumptuous for me to say what happened there. But I think apparently the incentives were there to start doing things in the right way. And I think that's what the ambassador rightly states. Renewables are the future, so let's not start looking back at nuclear or other technologies. We also could skip the telephone lines, we went straight into mobile technology. I said, look at the future and let's create the incentives to indeed tap these vast resources. And I think it will create many win-win situations, because the emphasis was placed on private sector development, and I think the enormous amount of jobs which can be created in the rural areas, small enterprise development, to make improve cook stoves, to make appliances for biogas programs, which now we have run successfully a program of 500,000 installations in Asia. Everything comes from China. That should be done here. Here we should make all the appliances, here we should develop the technology, here we should develop the capability to make all these things we can contribute and work on the future. So I think we could look at other countries, at South Africa, etc. The thing would be to put the right incentives in place, the right policies, the right structures in each and every country, and let countries work together to do the right things. And I think it's possible.
The problem that even these institutions, financial institutions and international institutions, they are separating North Africa and putting them with Middle East, yes, and also they say Sub-Saharan without or excluding South Africa. No, this is what we are not accepting in the African Union. Africa is Africa with all its, let's say 55. Yes, Morocco is now not a member of the Union, but let us say it is all Africa, and that's what we are always struggling with these institutions. And we believe that in Africa we can use our capacities, our capabilities, which are available even in North Africa or in South Africa, and also within Sub-Saharan Africa. There is a lot of capacities and a lot of resources that we can use to develop the continent with our efforts within the continents, not to make it this one and this one. This is for some reason to keep the statistics in the way they want it to be. No, let us deal with Africa as a continent.
So Africans in the diaspora should stop complaining and come back home and turn around the continent. And many thanks to all the experts, Ambassador Ben, Excellency, Dr. Ibrahim, Engineer DBC from Nigeria, and also Mr. Jean Blois. Thank you very much for coming. And on behalf of the Hot Seat team, I want to say thank you to everybody for taking part on the show. And you can visit us online, www.voxafrica.co.uk/hotseat. Remember, you can mail us, even send us questions about this topic. It's hotseat@voxafrica.com. Remember, we're still in Ethiopia, but I'll be back in London with you next week. Goodbye.